All right, so before I start the sermon, before I give the title of the sermon, just a quick introduction. I wrote this sermon a few weeks ago when I first started school, and many of most of you guys know I'm in school right now. It's done. Pray that that goes well. So the teacher, I think on the first week of school, he said this story about a guy he used to work with. He was a bully, not only a few fellows. And he was talking about this guy, and this guy was kind of a byword at his place of work. And this guy had a certain trait, and we've all ran into people that have this trait. It's this trait that is, I know everything. Right? You can tell me something, but I don't hear it because I already know it. Right? I'm the best at everything, and I already know it. And this guy that he was working with, he always, as soon as you would tell him or he would get a job, he already knew. And this guy would refuse to learn something new because he already knew everything that he had to know, right? And my teacher said this guy always walking around always with a carburetor in his hand. You don't know what a carburetor is? It used to be an old way of just injecting the fuel mixing air in an engine. It's obsolete right now. Like newer okay, in vehicles it's obsolete right now. It used to be the main thing. Leave it to a different mechanic. Um, it used to be like the main thing source, and people from like 20, 30 years ago, they could take carburetors apart. And I'm sure this guy he was talking about could probably take a carburetor apart and probably had new seals and have it totally rebuilt in like 5 minutes, 2 minutes. And there's videos on YouTube of people who can do that. They could take a carburetor apart, have it rebuilt, and ready to go in like under 2 minutes or around under 5 minutes, right? Because people are that good. They had that skill of doing it, right? But right now, if you have that skill and you go and work on motor vehicles, that's a useless skill to have. But this guy walked around almost with a carburetor in his hand. It's kind of sanctifying, like, yeah. Well, maybe in the past, he probably knew a lot about vehicles, how to do it. And that he just refused to, and that's what my teacher's saying, he just refused to learn new things, and he became obsolete. Because, and another trait that he has is that he always thought that he knew more than everybody else around him. And if you are that person, and we've kind of actually run into people like that on Soul Winning, where you knock on the door, it's like, oh, I already know everything about the Bible. I read it about 20 years ago. I read the whole thing 20 years ago in jail. Okay, they already know everything about it. And we in our day-to-day life run into people like that who already know everything, and you can't teach them new things because God forbid you would teach them something. Well, that means you know more than them, and we can't have that. They can't have that, right? So these people become, and this is the title of my sermon, unteachable. They become the unteachable. That's the title of my sermon, the unteachable. All right, so the first point is being unteachable a good thing? Is it being a good thing, right? So there in Psalms 32, it says, starting there in verse 8, I will instruct thee and teach thee in the way which thou shalt go, and I will guide thee with my eye. Be ye not as the horse or as the mule, which have no understanding, whose mouth must be held in with bit and bridle, lest they come near unto thee. Many sorrows shall be to the wicked, but he that trusteth in the Lord, mercy shall compass him about. So David said in the Spirit of God there, David in the Spirit of God said that God will teach us. And then goes to say, hey, don't be like a dumb animal that has to go listen to instruction. Don't be like a dumb animal, listen to instruction, and don't miss what he's saying in verse 10 after that. He says, you were going to feel like those dumb animals that have to be held in with bit and bridle. If you ever seen that horse with the eye thing that they have to just see what's in front of them so they can't look either way. So you just focus on what you want them to focus on. You got to put a bit in their mouth to just steer them. And God said, hey, don't be like that. Don't be like those animals that I have to make sure that I've got to put certain tools on you that you have to look a certain way, be able to be taught by God. You should be able to increase in knowledge. God should be able to teach you, right? God can't teach you if you already know everything, supposedly know everything. So don't be like that, that God's going to have to get you to a point and fill you with many sorrows. Like it says in verse 10, many sorrows shall be to the wicked, right? You're going to fill yourself with many sorrows. And God's going to have to take a piece of metal, shove it in your mouth, just so he can turn you where he wants you to go. They'll be able to be teach. When God says you something in the Bible, be ready to understand, be ready to hear, be ready to receive that. Or God is going to have to get something uncomfortable. He's going to have to do something to your eyes, to your mouth, in order to teach you and turn you in the way that he has to, or the way he wants you to go. In Ezekiel, Ecclesiastes 4, verse 13, you don't have to turn there. I only got one word there. Only got one verse there. It says, better is a poor and wise child than an old and foolish king who will no more be admonished. So what is admonish mean? Admonish, definition of admonish, it means to advise or urge someone earnestly, warn someone to do something to be avoided, right? So don't be like a foolish king. It's better to be like a child. What's a child? A child is somebody, I don't know, I've got kids. My oldest is 7 years old right now, and a 4-year-old. They are absorbing knowledge like crazy. Even the 7-month-old baby, she's watching everything. She's looking everywhere. She's absorbing information like crazy. But and God said it's better to be like a poor, wild child. And why poor? Why a poor child? Well, I got a rich little kid that everything gets handed to him. He might grow up and think it's like, hey, I've got all this knowledge, I got all this money. I don't have to worry about getting to teach because I got everything handed to me. But a poor child, he's got to work, he's got to learn something, he's got to put effort into it in order to teach himself something. So God says here in Ecclesiastes, it's better to be a poor and wise child. That wise child is the child that is getting that information in, than to be an old and foolish king. A king is like, who's higher than the king in earth, speaking as a human being? The king is on the top, right? It's better to be a poor wise child than a foolish king that will no more be admonished. No more, hey, tell the king, you shouldn't be doing that. Hey, do this better. That teach it's better to be a wise child. So is being unteachable a good thing? I don't think so. Like the Bible there, I showed you just a couple of verses there. It's like not even that deep in there. It's like the Bible's like, hey, don't be an unteachable person. It's not a good thing to be unteachable. That's a quick point. Okay, so who are the unteachable? Who are the unteachable? Point number 2. First point says it's not good to be unteachable. Second point is who are the unteachable? Who are these people? So the Dunning-Kruger effect is defined as a tendency of people with low ability in a specific area to give overly positive assessments of their ability. This is often seen as a cognitive like brain bias, as a systematic tendency to engage in enormous forms of thinking and judging. In the case of the Dunning-Kruger effect, this applies mainly to, and I got this off of Wikipedia. I'm reading off Wikipedia. This applies mainly to people with low skill in a specific area trying to evaluate their competence within this area. The systematic error concerns their tendency to greatly overestimate their competence, to see themselves as more skilled than they are. Okay, so that's quite a bit. So the Dunning-Kruger effect is somebody, I guess Dunning-Kruger got together, and they said there's people out there that have no skill. They got no skill. They have no idea what they're doing. But just to make themselves, in their brain, just to make themselves, they don't want to feel like, oh, I don't know. But they don't want to teach themselves anything. So what they do is they just, in their brain, they overstimulate themselves, saying like, I can do this. I'm good at this. I know what I'm doing. And they get this bad trait of just It's like you get this bias in your brain that hey, I can do that even though you can't. That's from Wikipedia, and it seems when you are talking to people with this problem, it's not just one thing that they're better at. It doesn't matter that if you're been doing this for decades. You know, when you write this stuff down, you start reading it. So when you talk to people like that out there at your job, or going out somewhere, or just day to day, and let's say somebody will come up to me, like I've been a mechanic, you've been a mechanic for a few years now, and somebody will come up to me. I remember actually years ago, um, I think it was like 3, 4 years ago, and my dad had a problem with his van, with his SUV. And he wanted my help, see what was going on. And I came there and we're looking at it, we're trying to figure out what was going on, why it wasn't starting, it wasn't starting while it was just dead. And we're just looking around, we got the hood open, and this guy just walks out of nowhere. Just comes up and he goes and he's like starts talking, trying to me and my dad, we I grew up around vehicles. My dad, he grew up, we fixed a lot of vehicles. Like we don't know, obviously we don't know everything about vehicles, but we can hold our own around vehicles, and we could, like, obviously, a seasoned mechanic can do way more than us, but to get a vehicle going, we can do it. This guy just comes up, and he just goes up, and he's like, oh, and just starts talking. That's like, hey, and just like, it's probably a fuse box, and then, well, and we were saying like, we think it's like a relay, and then he's pointing at the relay. It's like, no, that's a fuse box, and then we're yeah, okay. We're just talking about a relay, like one little part of the fuse box, and he's just trying to point out and try to teach us what a fuse is, what a relay, and we're just standing there like, I don't think you know what you're talking about. Anyways, it didn't take long until he just walked off because he thought that he just knew everything. And we run into people like that like people who study, who spend a lot of time. It's like it would be like me coming up to Brother Sam and just try to show him what Japanese symbols mean. It's like, yeah, I know what that means, and Brother Sam's just standing there, and it's like, and I just pull something out of my hat. It's like it means fish, and he's like, how do you know? Because it kind of looks like a little fish. And I just, oh, it means fish. And he's like, not even close. And then I would get upset. Like, God, that's what it means. You just don't know. Even though he spent hours and hours and hours teaching it, I just come up and I just like, I know everything. And that's a bad trait. But let's go to 1 Kings 2. 1 Kings chapter 2. We're gonna talk about a guy who thought he was all that. And on the surface, it looked like he was something. But if you actually read it, it turns out he wasn't really as good as he thought. So what are we talking about? We're talking about who are you, teacher? Who are you? There in 1 Kings chapter 2, starting there in verse 13. 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 13. And Adonijah, the son of Haggith, came to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon. And she said, comest thou peaceably? And he said, peaceably. He said, moreover, I have somewhat to say unto thee. So before I go any further, just a quick context, what's going on here. Adonijah, so David was in his deathbed. And he hadn't shown the people who's going to exceed him, who's going to be the next king, right? So to take matters in his own hands, his second oldest son, I believe, Adonijah, decided to take this in his own hands and declare himself king. But what David does, he's like, no, you're not going to be king. It's going to be Sam. It's going to be Solomon. And Solomon was chosen by God. God wanted Solomon to be king. And it turns out that David set Solomon up a king, and Adonijah, when he hears this happen, and all the people he invited just scatter because they know that King David has chosen Solomon. And then afterwards, Adonijah comes to Solomon's mother, Bathsheba, there, and he says, And he said unto, and then it starts there in verse 13, and Adonijah came to Bathsheba, and she said, Comest thou peacefully? And he said, peaceably. He said, moreover, I have somewhat to say unto thee. And she said, say on. In verse 15, and he said, thou knowest that the kingdom was mine. So he says to Bathsheba, thou knowest the kingdom was mine, and that all Israel set their face on me, that I should reign. Howbeit, the kingdom is turned about, and is become my brother. For it was him from the Lord. So, if you read that, it doesn't seem like he's like, yeah, it doesn't seem like he's, he's saying some stuff. But is it true what he's saying? Because he said, thou knowest, hey, you know, Bathsheba, you know that all Israel wanted me to be king. Right? Everybody wanted me to be king. But God chose something. At the first look, it may seem all innocent. Hey, and the reason why in the story he came to talk to Bathsheba, he wanted to marry his dad's old wife. It wasn't really a wife; it was kind of a concubine thing going on. But Solomon said no. But listen to the way Adonijah is talking in verse 15. He said, thou knowest that the kingdom was mine, and that all Israel set their faces on me that I should reign. Howbeit the kingdom is turned about and has become my brothers. So he said, hey, he's saying to Bathsheba, hey, you know all Israel wanted me to be king. But what does it say in 1 Kings 1, verse 39? So one chapter back, 1 Kings 1, verse 39, it says, and in verse 39, and Zadok the priest, took the horn of oil out of the tabernacle and anointed Solomon. And they blew the trumpet, and don't miss this part right here. And all the people said, and all the people said, but Adonijah just said that all the people wanted him. When he talked about Sheba, he said all the people wanted me. And all the people said, God save King Solomon. And all the people came up after him. After who? Who did they come up after? They came up after Solomon, not Adonijah, Solomon. And the people piped with pipes and rejoiced with great joy, so that the earth rent with the sound of them. And in verse 41, and Adonijah and all the guests, because Adonijah at this point, he invited a bunch of people over. He had a bunch of high officials there to make him king. When they heard, and all the guests that were with him heard it as they had made an end of eating. Do you know? So yeah, verse 41. Is that how 41? Okay. So notice there when it says there, and all the guests. The guests. Do you know the definition of guest? Do you know the definition of it is a person who is invited to visit the home or to take part of a function organized by another. So a guest isn't somebody to come on your own. There's somebody invited. You invited them. You told them to come to you. Invited Adonijah. You asked them to come over. Not all Israel knew I'm the best guy for the job, but then God got in the way. Because that's what Adonijah says. The only way Solomon actually got in life, the way Adonijah brought it out, the only way Solomon is actually king is because that's what God wanted. Only God stood in my way. Only God was the one that could take away the kingdom for me. The people wanted it. The people wanted me to be king, but God got in the way. That's what Adonijah was saying about Bathsheba. And if you keep reading, like I said, there where I showed you there, that they were just guests. They were just people that he invited. And all the people, they wanted Solomon. They were there at Solomon. They were happy at Solomon. And that's the characteristic with people like this. I'm the best. I know everything. And you know that what the root cause is. And you know what the root cause is of all this? It's pride. It's absolutely pride. And you know that God hates pride. Psalms 59:12 says, for the sin of their mouth and for the words of their lips, let them even be taken in their pride, and for cursing and lying which they speak. The cursing and lying which they speak. So the root cause of all that is their pride. I can't be told. I can't be told anything. I'm already the top of the food chain. So number one, we talked about a little bit. Who are the unteachable? Number two, no, that's number two. Number one is being unteachable a good thing? And the answer is no, it's not. Who are unteachable? Unteachable people are very prideful people that just want to, that are just filled with pride, that just want everybody to think, hey, I know best, I'm the best, I know what to do, I'm the best at everything. And number three is is how not to become an unteachable. How not to become an unteachable. Well, first off, we have to understand we all have the ability to get this better. We are not immune. We are not immune. We all have the ability to become this. Where we read before in Psalm 32:8, it says, I will instruct thee and teach thee in the way which thou shalt go. I will guide thee with my eye. So in Psalm 50, first and foremost, let God teach you. Let the all-knowing God of the universe guide you. When we think about people like this, I remember. So when I'm thinking of people like this, one guy jumps into my brain foremost all the time. When I was growing up, we had this family coming over to my parents' place all the time. He's kind of real. His wife is related to my dad. They're cousins, and her husband is that kind of guy. He was that guy that any subject he would tell you. He would just find something in his brain that might be remotely connected to that subject, and he just starts spitting off stuff, and you just stand there, he has no idea what he was talking about. He had no idea what he was doing, but he always had an answer, and he always knew what to say the best. And he's the kind of guy, and this guy always gave me these like bad vibes. He's like these very queer vibes. And you know what? What the biggest vibe was is he liked to dress up in women's clothing. And that's the biggest vibe. That's not the biggest giveaway. It's just like the way the guy acted. It's just like it's just that weird. And you know what? In Romans 1, the reprobate chapter, at the end of the chapter, it says in verse 30. I'm going to turn over. In verse 30, it starts lifting. I was starting verse 20. Being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful, who know in the judgment of God that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in death. So if you don't know what Romans 1 is about, it's about reprobate, right? People who have rejected God, people who have just kind of know that God's there, they see the handiwork of God, they know He's there, but they just refuse it. And God turns a switch in their brain and He turns them over to a reprobate mind. And at the end of a chapter, it shows these traits, these characteristics that these people now have. And one of the things it says, they are proud and they are boasters. What does boasters mean? A boaster is someone who is knowing of boasting, bragging, especially in a way that aggravates and shows excessive pride about the boast their skills, possessions, or accomplishments. That's exactly what we're talking about today. It's these unlearned people that's like, I know everything. I know the knowledge. Donald Trump, right? I'm the best at everything. I can't do a Donald Trump impersonation, but hey, I'm just better than everybody. I'm the most. I do the most for these people. I do the most. I'm like the greatest man there is, right? Excessive pride of his accomplishment. How about that for some motivation? How about that for some motivation of not taking this wickedness in, not becoming not to become an unlearned person, not become overly prideful of what we've accomplished, because we don't want to be anything remotely like that filth, right? We don't want to be anything remotely like those queers, right? And those things that hate God, reject God. And kids think like this, right? Some kids can really think like this. I remember my daughter talking and saying, when she was young, she always had this problem, and she was a kid, so we didn't really too worry about it. But it got to the point where, okay, we're gonna have to talk to her about this, where always she's a kid, so you're not too hard on her. But she always had this thing that she said is like, oh yeah, I know, I'm like the best at this, and I'm. She just had that, and we just have to tell her, hey, you shouldn't say that. Even though you're good at something, don't just go and say like, hey, I'm the best, because you always have more to learn. There's always you can always grow more, and people who are the opposite of the unteachable, people who like teaching, people who like learning, because they say when you talk to them, like one of the first things, like you give them a compliment, it's like, wow, you know a lot. Like if I would say to brother Sam, it's like, hey, you know a lot of Japanese, and like one of the first things you would probably say is like, no, I got a long way to go. I got a long way to go. But y'all learn people. They'd be like, yeah, I already know how to say at least 5 words. It's like, that just goes all language. I would say something in Japanese, but honestly don't know anything about Japanese. But and people like that on the opposite end, you know when they don't have a straight, it's because like I don't know everything about science. I don't know everything about astronomy, about geography, about mechanics, about like the laws of physics and everything, because it's like there's so much to learn, and that's so true. Is that the more you deep into any subject, the more if you actually study it, you can find how it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. There's different layers, especially the Bible. A person that says, "Look, I know everything about the Bible," this person hasn't read the Bible once. Because the more you read the Bible, the more you learn that there's more shells you take off, and then especially with end time prophecy, right? There's the immediate, there's the future, there's the past, and then it just keeps going. And that's just one subject. The Bible has many layers, right? It's like an onion. Every time you just take more and more and more, and the more you learn, the more you know. It's like I'm still not there yet. I still haven't. And I think we're never gonna get there. There's probably stuff hidden in the Bible that God himself is gonna have to show. But a great way not to become one of these unlearned is to learn. Don't stop. And that's what my teachers actually been really trying to hammer into me is like, don't stop learning. Right? No matter how old you are, don't stop learning. Always keep yourself in the loop because technology is changing. You hear a lot about, you go online, you hear the news. The one thing on the news, and it's just hammered so much right now, is AI. It's AI. It is hammered everywhere you look. Everything, every subject, everything. Everybody's talking about it. One thing in everybody's mind in the news is AI. Now, do we get to the point where we just shut off and just like, no, AI is never going to get anywhere? And maybe it won't. Maybe it just won't get as far. But maybe it won't. But do we just shut off our brains? It's like, I'm not even going to try to learn what AI is about. I'm not even going to try to learn how to use AI. And it comes to the point where it actually is the new internet. What if people like 20 years ago said like, this new internet, that's just It's just a phase. 30 years ago, people look at it, it's like, no, that's a phase. She's gonna go away. She's gonna die. But nowadays, if you don't know how to use the internet, if you don't know how to use computers, if you don't know how to use software in any subject, in any profession, you got nothing. Let's say a blacksmith. Let's say we go back 100 years, and you're a blacksmith, and maybe you're a young blacksmith apprentice, and you just start off in that apprenticeship. But now they're putting in, like, maybe electricity is coming in. But now, 100 years down the road, blacksmiths are like, what do you call it? Millwrights or something like that. Like millwrights, you gotta know. It's no longer just hitting metal on metal, just shaping it. It's not how it goes anymore. Now it's all machine driven. You gotta know how to program it into a computer, and the machine brings it out. It bends it for you. It cuts it for you. You know, laser. To be so-called forger or whatever, you have to be able to use computers. And actually, like, there's people out there, you see them on YouTube, that they go back and they use just blanks and just make stuff. That's just a hobby. You know, you're not gonna have a profession like that. You can't make any. Some people can make like knives, and some people can make a great job and make beautiful knives, make sheaths just like the old ways, and they're great quality knives. But that's like one person. You're not gonna have like this multi-million-dollar company, or you're not gonna get anywhere in life just like that. Nowadays, everything's computerized. Now, if you would just shut your brain off and say, "I'm not learning this," well, you're not gonna get anywhere. You become one of these unlearned people. And the same thing with like this new AI. As like we're at the point where is it gonna get somewhere, or is it not gonna get somewhere? And especially in our trade, is it going to do something? We could be like, well, it's not really going to talk. It's not really going to do anything. It's not really going to bother us. We're always going to have to physically put in new brakes. We're always going to have to physically tear engines apart, put in new parts. That's all we're going to have to do. But maybe we're always going to have to do that to put in parts now. But our equipment and our vehicles could become run by AI, and we would have to know how to program or how to talk to AI in order to diagnose and to fix these problems. Because vehicles, if this AI thing becomes more mainstream, it's gonna come into vehicles eventually, and the vehicle are gonna be controlled by artificial intelligence. That's gonna happen if it comes bigger and bigger. So us as me as a mechanic, or Michael as a mechanic, especially in agriculture, like I can see AI being used in agriculture as if they start to become unmanned equipment. So now you've got to be able to understand that this AI has to be disabled before I can work on this vehicle, or it has to be able, or it has to be reprogrammed, or it has to be uploaded. And if Brother Michael or myself would just be like, no, we're not learning anymore. I'm not touching that AI. I know exactly the end of everything. Well, then we become unlearnable. We become obsolete. We become obsolete. So and that's what every area of your life, right? Especially as Brother Alex, as an engineer, like, I think that's really gonna be AI controlled if AI becomes more thinking. And if you would just stop like, I don't care about programming. Well, yeah, I can program probably more efficiently, probably quicker than you. You're gonna have to know, not try to keep up with the AI, but you're gonna have to know how to program with the AI or something like that. So if he would just shut off the brain like that, then you can become obsolete. And then his boss would be like, well, I could pay you to do something that this thing can do quicker, but I would like to have you around if you know how to use that. So, like, in order to do that, you gotta keep learning. Same thing with nutrition. It's going to be on every area of our life. If it doesn't come like that, like maybe there's a chance it won't. But if it doesn't, and you still learn it, well, you still got that brain full of that knowledge, because it's not useless knowledge. So in conclusion, it's being unteachable is this thing. Well, Proverbs 25:14 says, "Whoso boasted himself of a false gift is like clouds and wind without rain." So, right, like clouds and wind without rain. You know, if you have a drought and you see some clouds in the sky, it's like, finally, we're getting rain. We're finally getting some rain. Um, but then it doesn't even pour. It doesn't even give rain. Well, it's kind of like the boasting itself, but a false gift. Like, guy come up, he's like, yeah. Or maybe you have a person interviewing for a job. Yeah, I know how to program. I know everything that you know about AI. And then you hire him, and he's like, hey, here's this. Can you fix this? Or you can do AI, and he has no idea what he's done. Well, you just hired a worker. Okay, so that's number one. Is being unteachable a good thing? It is not. Who are the unteachable? People who think they have arrived, but reality is they haven't even left the station. Right? People who are going on a journey, they have left. They think they have arrived at their destination, and they're there, and they don't have to go anywhere else. But the truth is, you haven't even left the station. Right? You haven't even left the station of training. You haven't even gone to the first step onto becoming actually teachable. You're unteachable because you refuse to do any learning. And how not to become unteachable? How not to become unteachable? So one of the most biggest thing we have to understand is foremost. We have to understand this of how not to become unteachable. You have to understand that you can become the unteachable. You can absorb that. You can have that trait. We're all susceptible to that. So what's the first step of not becoming that is watch your pride. Watch your pride. That's number one. Don't be a boaster. Don't be a boast in yourself. It's like, yeah, I know everything there needs to know about programming. I know everything it needs to know about Japanese. You're gonna come to the point where he's brother Sam, he's fluent. Like, just you couldn't distinguish him between a person born in Japan to brother Sam. It's not over yet. It's only starting, man. You got to a level for sure. You got a higher level. But there's still more levels. And you haven't. It doesn't mean you now know everything there is to know about Japanese. So don't stop learning. And don't stop learning. That's the thing. You can see it all the time. People get to the point their whole life. They start off young. They start in a certain trade. They start in a certain, they start becoming an electrician, mechanic, a heavy mechanic. They start in Japanese in coding as being an engineer, and they they start that, and years and years and years they put in there, and all they're thinking about is get to retirement, and finally they get to the point where they can retire, and then they retire, and then they just stop. It's like, I'm done. I'm no longer going to be part of that. I'm no longer working. I'm not doing it for the money anymore. And then they just stop work. They just stop learning, and you can see it. People at that point, that's when they go downhill. People who stop learning, people who stop doing physically, is like, from now on, I'm not doing anything. I'm not moving. I'm not leaving my house. I'm not leaving my couch. And you can find it. That's when people really start having health problems. And it's like a few years, 5 years down the road, maybe even less, they start having heart problems. They start having liver problems, and they start having these brain diseases. And the next thing you know, they're just gone. And how do you stop that? You use that muscle in your brain, and you just work it out just like you have to work out everything else. And also, I have to say this too, with the knowledge, not everything we learn is going to be good thing to learn. Not everything we take in is going to be something that actually going to be helpful. We got to have the knowledge to discern it. And back in where we started in Psalms 32, it says, if you want knowledge, go to God. God can teach you. God is able to teach you. If you want knowledge, you'll just ask God. God will help you. But don't go ahead and just say, hey, God, give me knowledge. And just sit down, just sit back, pull your thumb, and just wait there. Just like, yeah, I'm waiting, God. Still don't know what the first law of thermodynamics is. But yeah, just waiting. People in 2025 have no excuse. 50 years ago, you had an excuse. You actually had to read a book. You actually had to go to the library. You actually had to find something. People 50 years before that, they had a real excuse. Right? A lot of people didn't want to read right. Right? Now, you have no excuse. You have the access everywhere you go. You have the unlimited knowledge right there. Google search it. You don't even have to Google search anymore. You just ask your phone. You just hold down a button and ask your phone, and it will blow your information in there. But it takes a little bit of effort. It takes, it actually takes some time to actually read it, to actually listen. Podcasts. You don't have to read it. You gotta watch what you listen to, obviously. There's some good information podcasts out there. Where else was looking on that? You don't need it? All right, whatever. Okay, so with that, let's pray. Thank you, Almighty God, for giving us the ability to have all this so readily available to us. Please, God, give us the knowledge to understand and to have the motivation to go out and accept this information. God, please help us not to become an unlearned person, a person that just refuses to learn and says, I'm here, I've arrived, I'm going to go more. Lord, please bless this church and people that can hear you right now. Lord, please bless them with knowledge, Father. Open their understanding, give them the ability to learn and to receive that knowledge, Father. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ, and thank you for your faithfulness. And it's His name